On the 27th of February of 2010, I was sleeping when I was woken by a big shake. In Chile, we're used to earthquakes, and you wouldn't bother for less than a 6 in the Richter scale. So I waited until I realized it was a big one. I did what any Chilean would do. Although I was heavily pregnant, I woke my daughter up, held her in my arms, and ran to the safest place in our flat, a space in between structural walls and under a beam. My husband rushed too, to hold our television. The quake lasted 90 seconds. We could hear the noise of the earth moving underground. Then we checked if we could open the front door. Luckily, our building was in perfect condition. Then we opened the windows, and we didn't see any buildings collapsed, but people were outside, scared of getting trapped inside their houses. Then we called our families, and it took us some time because the lines were collapsed. Everyone was doing the same. At that time, we couldn't sleep, so we turned on the radio to find official information. It was an earthquake of 8.8 magnitude, the second strongest earthquake in Chile's history. The quake was so strong that scientists estimate that it moved the Earth on its axis by 8 centimeters, and it shortened the length of the day by more than 1 microsecond. Although the epicenter was far from Santiago, many buildings were destroyed in different regions of the country. Also, the earthquake was followed by a tsunami, which destroyed many coastal cities. Despite the magnitude of the disaster, which affected more than 75% of the population, only around 500 people died. However, more than 300,000 houses were completely destroyed. Those families, they had lost their only asset, their memories, their homes. In recent decades, the number of disasters caused by natural events has increased. Some researchers suggest that there are 3 main reasons for this: a rising frequency of natural phenomena due to climate change, an increase in the number of people living in vulnerable and exposed areas, and an increase in the use of low-cost design and poor quality materials. My country is exposed to earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, mudslides, floods, and fires, and we have learned to be prepared for some of them. After every big earthquake, our building codes are revised, leading to a safer behavior of buildings and a reduced number of casualties. However, after these events, many buildings are still being destroyed. And Chile is not the only one. After recent disasters, many houses have been destroyed in different places around the world. In the US, in Haiti, the Philippines, and Nepal, China, Japan, among others. The number of houses destroyed after these recent disasters represents 3 times the housing stock of London. As you can see, housing, it is a critical issue after disasters. For families affected, to get durable accommodation may take years because of different reasons, such as the removal of debris, finding available land, lack of material. What would you do if your house was destroyed? In my case, if the 2010 earthquake had destroyed my flat, I would have moved to my parents' house, or I would have been able to rent another accommodation. I would have asked the insurance company to cover some of the repairing costs. But not everyone is that lucky. Usually the most exposed are the most vulnerable, the least prepared, the ones that do not have insurance, no other housing options, no savings at all. After that earthquake in Chile, many families went from living in traditional old houses of 100 square meters to temporary houses of 18 square meters. Or fishing communities were displaced from the coast to temporary settlements on the hills. Many families after disasters are housed in interim accommodation, trying to go back to their routines, to normality, to send their kids to school, to start to work again. This process of recovery does not take months, it takes years for them. And because it takes years to recover after disaster, shelter is more than just a building, more than just a roof alone. It is a home. And home has been defined as a location, a place, physical structure, a material, but also as a set of feelings and emotions, and as the relation between these concepts that ties them together. Homes mean privacy, intimacy and comfort, security and control. Our ideas and values, relationship with family and friends. So what happens when you lose your home? If home refers to these complex dimensions, homelessness, as the opposite, means the lack of them. The United Nations states that homelessness carries implications of belonging nowhere rather than having nowhere to sleep. In that sense, homelessness implies disengagement from the culture, society, and identity. And why is this important to designers or architects? Why is this important to me? Because there is little information about how design of housing should be in order to reduce the stress caused by a disaster, despite the important role of housing in the psychological and the physical well-being of those families affected. There is information about minimum standards, efficient arrangements, or how to organize a group of houses, but very little is said about adequacy for a temporary situation that will last for many years, how to provide them with a sense of belonging, dignity. In recent years, many proposals have been published in journals, websites, and books, but few of them have been implemented. And actually, this is a good thing, because many of them are inadequate for the traditions and the local cultures and the climate, focusing on technical innovation rather than taking into account the needs of those families. A one-size-fits-all design should not be used to shelter families after disaster, because it is crucial to incorporate local culture and home practices in order to truly support the recovery of those affected. In the 70s, polyurethane foam domes were used after earthquakes in Turkey, Peru, and Nicaragua. Most of those shelters were rejected by those communities because they never lived in an igloo-shaped house before. Moreover, the use of a very combustible material was not appropriate for families that use open fire for cooking. In recent years, new materials and technologies have been used in temporary housing after disasters. It is okay if they are used with care. However, we have seen metal, timber, plastic panels being used in places where those materials are inadequate. For example, in Sri Lanka, after the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, metal shelters were called microwave ovens because it was too hot for families to live inside. Or after earthquakes in Peru and Chile, the same model of a house was used, while in that part of Peru, the climate is desertic. In that part in Chile, it's rainy and cold. In that part of Peru, families traditionally cook outside their houses. In that part of Chile, the kitchen is the center of the house, which keeps it warm during the winter. Those differences should be included in the design, because although temporary, those houses will be used for the midterm. Did you know that in the car industry, the sound of the door closing is engineered to make you feel safe? Or that some cars are so good at insulating outside noise that they need to feed the sound of the engine back through the car's speakers? They do that to make you feel comfortable and to make you feel safe. Why don't we have something like that in houses, in places where families need to recover, to feel less vulnerable, more at home after disasters? It is also important to remember that home is not static. It implies a process of homemaking, a continuous state of incremental improvement that reflects our social ambitions. Homes are sites of memory, where we place objects in order to remind ourselves about family, friends, and events. And homes are shaped by cultural norms, that our idea to belong, our concepts of identity, and to create a position. The capacity to modify one's home can provide a sense of achievement and control, self-expression, and freedom of action. The modifications are not only influenced by practical decisions such as space or quality. Priorities can be less apparent, such as the importance of creating a facade before finishing other rooms, because homes also reflect ideals and aspirations. After that earthquake in Chile, families knew they must leave their shelters by a certain date. However, they invested time and resources in order to improve those temporary houses, enlarging them and customizing them to their needs. That can be seen as a move towards a durable solution. However, in many cases, they are done without any technical supervision and without any knowledge of building construction. That can lead to illegal occupancy or a poor quality housing. However, when the land is owned by families, it can be a good extension of the permanent house. There are many examples of flexible designs that can catalyze these modifications. Flexibility can provide families the opportunity to transform their shelters, their houses, into places to call home. Although this example is a permanent house, those strategies could be used for post-disaster accommodation. But in most cases, those designs are done with an idea of universal prototypes unrelated to culture and focusing on creating innovative designs instead of the real needs of the families. Therefore, today, I will not give you a uniform, unique design to shelter after any disaster, because each design has to be done carefully, including cultural values, social adequacy, material availability, and flexibility for future changes, including multidisciplinary teams. Our task is to pre-design temporary houses that are adequate, including those local cultures. We know that families will be living there for many years, and we know the places and areas that are most exposed. We know that despite plans of risk reduction, some catastrophic events will happen anyway. A house is more than just a building. If we combine the tools we already have with an understanding of local culture and design, we can support those families to create a home after disaster. Thank you.